kind of goes back to, how do you know if a relationship should start, right? I mean, again, it goes back to the Holy Spirit, right? And the feelings that you get. I mean, if you are in anguish and it's, there's anger involved, there's arguments, and it's not producing good fruits of the Spirit, then I think that's obviously a good sign. We obviously need to pray. We need to get an answer from God, and we need, to know that it's the right thing to do. But usually it's a telltale sign of just like I said, the fruits of what comes from it, right? And it's pretty easy to know that. It brings confusion, right? You don't have assurance for the future, right? There's certain things that'll come up that, it's difficult, right? But I think that with all that, with not having the assurance, with not having peace, then obviously you need to talk to the other person too, right? You need to get their perspective, and they need to be in agreement, right? And you need to understand where they're coming from. But really, I mean, it's case by case. I mean, that's a tough question, Ed. I mean, that's a tough one. But I think we all know when it's time. I think we can all agree that we know when it's time to cut losses. I mean, just even at work, right? I'll just give an example in the corporate environment, right? Because it's very relationship based, and when the other person doesn't want to help themselves, or doesn't want to help the greater cause, i.e., maybe the relationship or their job, when they've given up, when they don't want to make it work, and as a result, their personality and character has diminished, and they're showing up to work with a bad attitude, and they're just bringing drama, and there's problems arising. That's usually, right, a time when it's time to part ways. After, of course, you've tried, right? You've tried to make it work. You've put your best foot forward. You've spoken to them. You've had coaching sessions, counseling sessions, possibly. You've prayed over it. You've really done everything you can do, right, for that person. And you've prayed for them, and then it gets to a point where you've done everything you can do, so it's probably just best for you not to be together, or for that person not to be at your company and work for you. So it's the same thing, right? So that was long-winded, tough question, Ed.
No, you're good. And the thing is, the questions were anonymous, so we can't even call out who sent this question. So that's why it's anonymous, I guess. Jalissa, what's your take on it?
I think in addition to all that Brandon said, a way for you to know that it has to end is when you start noticing red flags. So I think going back to knowing your standards, it's also important knowing what you are not willing to live with. I think when you have an understanding of what you're not willing to tolerate, no matter who the person is, and then you start seeing those red flags, then I think it's time for that we're gonna have to like start kind of like walking away, like thinking, okay, I'm gonna pray about this because now this is not sitting well with me. I'll have a conversation with my partner, but you're not gonna continue having conversations for the rest of your life. It's either you're gonna have a conversation, we're gonna work through it, or we're going to part ways, right? And that's the beauty also of like this dating stage before you get married. When you're dating intentionally, then you have that space to be intentional, be communicative, be as expressive as you can. You can never over communicate, right? Because you never know what the other person is thinking, and they can never know what you're thinking. So I think just over communicating to make that person know, hey, this is what I like, this is how this made me feel. Do you have an understanding? Can you comprehend why this hurt me in the way that it did? Because I've been there where I've expressed that into that person. Oh, it wasn't such a big deal, but to me it was. So I think it's understanding why it was a big deal to me. It could have been something maybe from my childhood, or just something that I personally don't like, right? And that can happen also vice versa, that I may not overreact to something, but that person is going to take it differently. So I think it's just understanding that and not negotiating that, because you can let it go now, but when you're married, are you going to be able to tolerate it 20 years, 30 years? And marriage, I know that Brandon said earlier marriage is temporary, but it's, when he meant temporary, it's not like you're getting married to get divorced, right? It's just temporary because life is seasonal. Things happen, and you don't know, health can come into play, and that can be that, right? But ultimately you get married for long term, not to get divorced. So you want to make sure that you're very intentional about what you're doing, what you're accepting, yes to. And then also, in addition to the red flags, I think it's just super important to always communicate where you are. I think sometimes people change and evolve, and their perspectives change. And if you're not on the same page, then you might not be able to sustain that relationship, right? Like, I can be in a season where I'm more career driven, and my partner can be more, I want to get married and have children. So is that really going to work if we're not able to compromise on, hey, I want to get this done? Can we compromise, on a season of where we can get married and have children? That's just an example. So you want to just make sure that you're both always on the same page, because I think if you're not and you let time go, then that's gonna be more detrimental than just saying right now, hey, this is what I want right now. Are we in this together?
That is so good. What about you, Candace?
I think what both of you have already said is perfect. And I think it pretty much summarizes all of the reasons that I would say that you might have it called to your attention that it's time to end a relationship. But I think, I guess, just to like pull out the couple of things that stood out and are like top of mind for me in my own thinking is one, to all of our conversation about, whether God is, like Brandon said, protecting people from you. Sometimes we end up by our own desires, like you were saying earlier, Ed, in relationship with those people. And we should not have been, perhaps. Maybe it was okay at first, but then it came to, light that, hey, we're actually not a fit. Everything that this person is trying to do to cultivate their garden, I'm digging up, or everything that I'm trying to do to cultivate mine, he's digging up, has usually been like been a red flag for me, like, oh no, something is not right here. Like, we're actually never going to get anywhere. And we definitely are not going to get as far as we could together if that's the case. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is just, sometimes we do grow and change, and we should be growing and changing. And if we haven't had clarity on, what God has called us to do, and we'll have an overarching calling as followers of Christ. Like, we understand that we all have an overall purpose, but there are gifts and talents that you have and inclinations that you have that make you fit for maybe a certain, type of work or a certain type of lifestyle. And everyone doesn't fit with what it was that you are, or what it is that you're here to do. So sometimes you grow enough to understand that I thought this would work, but actually we're not aligned with each other. And maybe our yokes are unequal. So we need to part ways here.
That is so good. Like, yes, not everybody is meant to be in your life. We are called to love everyone, but there's a such thing as loving people from afar. Not everybody has to be close to you. And that's why I realized. So for me, the two things, the first thing I look at the relationship, is it getting me closer to God or further away from God? if it's getting me further away from God, it has to end. The second thing is the individual respecting my standards that I already told her. Because my whole thing is, if you don't respect my standards, you're indirectly disrespecting me, because it's my standards. So for example, if a person says, I don't like when someone raises their voice at me because it just takes me back to the past, because my parents used to raise their voice at me and it just triggers me. When you keep raising your voice at me after I told you not to do it, you just disrespecting me. So I will have to just end the relationship. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to sound selfish, but it's God that you have to think about yourself, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if this person just keep draining from you and draining from you and draining from you, and you're like, I told you my standards, but you keep going to, you keep looking at my standards and just spitting on it and keep going against what I told you affects me, I just have to let it go. So for me, are you making me get closer to God, or you are repelling me from God? And the second thing is, are you respecting my standards or not? So anyone else, they can chime in. Y'all can chime in before we go to the next question.
I just wanted to kind of respond to what you just said, Ed, about this, about standards. I think sometimes that sort of situation is a space where a person, maybe, you know, the young lady that you're dating in this scenario should say, if she's self-aware, now I may need to bow out of this relationship, because she may not be able to respect a standard that actually works for you, right? And maybe there's a place where she knows that she can grow and is ready to grow and is able to, you know, prepare to evolve in a way and do things differently than how she's been doing them. But chances are, if she's the voice raiser, she's been a voice raiser forever, right? And so she would have to actually be ready to evolve into a new personhood in order to be able to respect your standard. At the point that she realizes that's your standard, I think, you know, this is a place for all of us, which is a hard time to say, oh no, I may need to like get out of this relationship or take some space away from it. Sometimes you, as much as you might want to, you cannot, as soon as you would like to, meet someone's very healthy standard. So you need to be honest about that. And then both of you can decide what to do with it.
That is so good, Candace. Thank you. Jalissa or Brennan?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, just off of what you said, Ed, about, you know, is this person bringing me closer to God or not? I mean, I think that's it right there, right? You know, you pick your relationships, you pick your friends wisely, and you follow them as far as they follow Christ, right? So the same thing with who you're in a relationship with. So, yeah, I just wanted to just say how good that was. I mean, that's such a good point. So
that is so good. You follow them as far as they follow Christ. Man, that's tweetable right there. Okay, be awesome with the one-liners. What about you, Jalissa?
I just agree with everything that you were saying. Everyone has brought up really good points, and add to your point of if they're drawing you further or closer to God. My motto is my partner and I are going to advance the kingdom. So that's just non-negotiable. So if I cannot advance the kingdom, even if he's not pulling me away from God, he's still letting me do my thing. But if together as a power couple, we cannot advance the kingdom, then that's just a problem right there. That's see you later. It was so nice knowing you.
Thank you for watching this video. If you want more content, subscribe over here and watch the next video over there. God bless you.